A 501c3 status means that nonprofit organizations cannot get involved in certain ways in politics. Does a new policy exempt church clergy members from that very rule? EJ's here to discuss.
Yes. So, Senator James Lankford, who is known for pro-Israel, anti-abortion, and borderline racist stances, wants the Johnson Amendment, an amendment made to keep charities and churches out of politics, scrapped, as he believes it infringes upon the free speech of pastors. Frankly, as far as I'm concerned, it's a bid to chisel away at the non-existent barrier between church and state. The story is from The Friendly Atheist by Hemant Mehta on the April 14th, 2025.
Yeah, and when it comes to the effort to do away with the Johnson Amendment, it's actually not overturning an amendment per se, but it's just an attempt to introduce a new bill to revise what the IRS says 501c3 organizations are allowed to do, if I understood that correctly. The thing that I have a problem with here is that Lankford actually admits that this effort is not even really needed. EJ, what is he talking about? Why go through the trouble to make revisions to an IRS rule that restricts political involvement from 501 or political support from 501c3 nonprofit organizations? Why do that if it's useless? What's he talking about?
Well, I feel part of it is because churches get away with so much, whether it's covering up assaults like we were talking about with the Catholic Church, controlling towns, as you tend to find in places like Mormon communities, or even in some cases violating key legal documents like the Constitution. Chances are, if it's illegal, the church has done it and gotten away with it, which is a worrying precedent that hopefully, not holding out much hope, we don't see continued in the future. There is an upside, though. If they get rid of the Johnson Amendment, or at least they repeal some of it and allow 501c3 charities to be more vocal, it means that some charities can go gloves off and speak their mind, which may not work out so well for folks like Senator Lankford, because not all 501c3 charities are churches. Some of them are charities focused on helping people get better lives, and not all of them would agree with a lot of the things that he is very vocal about.
Well, we at the nonprofits are part of a 501c3 nonprofit organization in the atheist community of Austin, and I don't agree with probably many of the things that Lankford supports. And so if he sets a precedent for us to speak our minds a little bit more fluidly, I would welcome that. But, Rob, getting back to the idea of this bill not even really being necessary, is there any substance to it, and does it make a difference at all?
It depends on what you mean by what level of substantive it is, because actually within the bill, no. Like he has already admitted that. The point is to remove barriers from pastors being able to say things that they would otherwise not be able to say, because they're saying that like the IRS is targeting them, and that's simply not true. And he knows it. Pastor Josh Blevins, for example, of the Grace Calvary Chapel in Missouri, is like on video literally just saying, vote for this person, they're not going to do anything to us. So it's like they already don't respect the rules. So substantially, no, there's nothing in there, because like they're already not being targeted. However, I came into this discussion being like, they need to stop it because they need to follow the rules. And frankly, EJ, you've like immediately compelled me. It should pass. And then since they're already not following the rule, it actually just opens everyone else up to do the thing they're already doing. So hell yeah, brother, I'm in.
Yeah. And on that note, with the pastor, excuse me, well, not with the pastor, with Senator Lankford already kind of admitting that clergy members do get away with this sort of thing, and maybe the bill is not necessary. I have this idea that maybe he's blowing a dog whistle to everybody to say, hey, start campaigning. You're not going to get in trouble. Like, you're fine, right? And so with that, I want to turn to Tracy and ask, are the pastors or clergy members in this country afforded different free speech rights than average Americans.
Of course. In the same way that service members are afforded different free speech rights. When you sign up to a certain agreement with the government, they afford you certain things and take away certain things as payment. Okay. When you sign up as a 501c3 organization, you gain some benefits, and in return, you give up some things. It's that way with everything. It's just because it's with the government, the only thing they really give out is certain rights to certain things, and the only thing they can really take or tax benefits, I suppose. The only thing they can really take from you is either money, which they're giving you tax benefits, so why would they take money? So they take away, you can't talk about these certain things. And I think that's kind of the way it should be. If you agree to a certain set of rules, you should follow that set of rules. Sure. I don't know why that's such a big problem.
But go ahead, Rob.
Yeah.
Rob, real quick, what I wanted to follow up with is, with the admission that they are not held to the same standards, are they actually afforded different free speech rights in a different way, in that they're not restricted, but they're actually given more? So go ahead, Rob, please.
Well, that's what I was saying, that EJ has just compelled me so much, because EJ literally said 501c3, he was quoting the senator, infringes on the free speech of pastors, as if that's a bad thing. That's the thing, is that it's like, they're infringing on the free speech of pastors. Yes, it's doing literally the thing it is meant to do. Mm-hmm. You're right. It's one of the rare cases where we can tell them, you are correct. It is infringing. That's what it's supposed to do. So it's just kind of funny to me that they're pointing to the thing working properly and being like, do you see what they're doing to us?
It's a bit like if they signed up to serve and then they complained that they had to wear a scratchy uniform all day. Yeah, that was in the contract.
Yeah. Well, I am still currently serving, and I never had it in my contract that my uniform would be uncomfortable, to be honest with you. But they've made great gains, and I love my job. But
there are certain things you are not permitted to say as a service member.
That's exactly right. And I wouldn't violate that. And I take my agreement seriously. I don't understand. And that's why, I asked, do clergy members have the same free speech rights? Because they seem to get away with it, and admittedly so. And if the senator that is writing this bill to remove that is actually saying, well, we don't really need to do it, don't they already have a benefit over other people? Like, for example, us. Because if I got on here in a segment, or any one of you did, and started either really bashing and obliterating a political opponent a political an elected official or a political party, without supporting it with some kind of data, we could be in violation. And something tells me that we wouldn't have the same protections as clergy members do. And so on that, go ahead, Tracy. I would like you to reflect on that.
Well, viewers, I'm going to speak directly to them for a second. Viewers, before this segment and a few times in our recording session we're having tonight, we have talked very explicitly about what we are permitted to and what we are not permitted to say. We're talking about it in the ACA right now, going to get some new discussions about it. We take this very seriously, and it's very disheartening to find that we care very much about respecting the rules and following the agreement that we've made, when we find out that these guys don't even care, and they're trying to change the rules to get away with something they can already get away with.
It's worse than that. They openly mock it. You watch the video with the pastor, Josh
It's just disheartening. EJ over here has a lot to say, but he has to figure out how to say it so that he can stay within the constraints of what we're allowed to say. And I watch EJ, very smart man, have this hard time trying to figure out what he's got to say, and they just mock us. They just mock those who want to follow the rules.
You know what? On that note, I want to ask you, EJ, why is it that Christian institutions are not held to the same standards as everyone else?
I think part of it, at least in America, goes back to the old anti-commie and anti-Reagan days, because, well, at least back then, everything was seen, if it was anti-USSR, it was good. And the USSR were atheists, so we need to be very strong Christians. So you know what? If occasionally a pastor breaks a little rule, well, you know what? It helps us in the long run. And that, like a lot of things from that era that may be slightly outdated, have just stuck around. So that it's become normal these days to, well, this pastor may have endorsed X political party or political person. However, they all do it. It's nothing really, despite the fact that they agreed to rules that the rest of us have to follow. And if they seriously, if they don't want to get behind the restrictions that come with the 501c3 charity title, they should not get the benefits that go with it.
Sure. And I think that I agree with you there. If they are going to violate those rules, then their tax benefits should be taken away. Do you imagine, with all of the discussion in government and politics right now in this country about wasting money, about not collecting adequate taxes, how much property taxes, if paid to the United States, whether it's the federal government or the state and local government, how much money? I don't even know if I could put a figure on it. It'd be in the trillions. It would have to be every year if they paid their fair share of property taxes. And so, yeah, the fact that they can openly tout violations of this law, it's really disconcerting to me. And I really don't have much to say on that. I think that when it comes to, well, you know what? I want to turn this over to you guys. Rob, why do you think that this is allowed?
It's well, that's the thing. It's not allowed by rules, but it is allowed because they just keep doing it and they can openly, like, I'm just gonna keep harping on specifically the one video of just where he specifically says they're not gonna get us. Like they just know. One thing about this discussion that I thought was really interesting is that normally when this sort of thing occurs, the talk tends to go in the direction of this is political theater. They're doing it for their constituents, but it doesn't actually mean anything. Like that's just, and both sides do it genuinely because it's all just rage bait. But what I find very interesting about this specific one is that this talk hasn't been much about the political theater-ness of it because he's already admitted that it is. He already admitted that it didn't mean anything, but like we're genuinely considering the effects of what if it was repealed. So it's almost like this guy, in an attempt to have political theater, hit on something that would actually be a substantial change.
Yeah. Go ahead, EJ.
He threw a punch, not realizing it would let everyone else punch back. It's not something that is incredibly common, but when it does happen, it does. At least it gave me that little moment of oh, this has a little unintended side effect that might actually help everyone else in the long run. Maybe we shouldn't intervene this time.
Yeah, and I think as people who speak out against the abuses of religion and the importance of keeping religious institutions and government separate, we can realize or we can speak to the fact that things do backfire and precedents are dangerous, right? This is a little bit of a different case, but we know that if one group gets away with abuse, probably the rest of us, even if we're not being or gets away with, if one group is abused and the abuser is not held to a standard or held accountable, that those other groups are probably going to get abused someday because nothing was done about it, right? This is a little bit different. This could also backfire. And that's what makes it kind of similar in the way that we go about doing our business. You know, we have to kind of call out the hypocrisy, and we have to make sure that people are held to standards so that standards that are not enforced don't lead to further abuses. And I think that these standards do need to be enforced. But if this particular one they don't want to do doesn't get enforced, like we've talked about, I'm probably okay with that, because that means that I get to do more things that I'm not supposed to do, which would be really beneficial and helpful to the cause that I'm so invested in. Go ahead, Rob.
Well, the bigger issue, you're right? Like in an equal playing field, that's absolutely correct. It's just that by virtue of being non-religious, we have less population. So mob rules in this case. Yeah.
And with that, I want to, just in case anybody's not following what we're talking about, by the way, so the exemption in this bill that would allow clergy members to openly support political members states that as long as their speech, their rhetoric, their support is made in the ordinary course of the organization's regular and customary activities in carrying out its exempt purpose, and B, results in the organization incurring not more than de minimis incremental expenses. And what that means, according to IRS.gov, a de minimis benefit is one for which, considering its value and frequency with which it is provided, is so small as to make accounting for it unreasonable. This basically says, hey, clergy members, go out, support whoever you want politically, even if you get more money because of it. We're not really concerned about that because it's going to be so small. Who gets to decide what's so small? And with that, this group, these religious groups, while most of us are not religious, and they are, to the mob rule point that Rob made, they are incredibly organized, and that is a major concern. And so, Tracy, I want to talk to you about that. In what way do the rest of us combat such an organized structure that is powerful, that has a lot of money, and that is intertwined with far-right groups in our government? What can be done?
As near as I can tell, the only thing that we can do is to just be loud. That's the best thing I can figure out, is just be loud. Don't sit down and be quiet. Bad people get stronger when good people stay quiet. And that's the best I can come up with. Be loud. Don't sit down and let things happen.
Yeah.
And just as a side note, I did a little bit of calculation while you guys were talking about property tax for one specific building in my city, the Cathedral Basilica of St. Louis. If the Catholic Church were required to pay property tax on that building alone, it would be over $1 million yearly.
Oh.
So go ahead, EJ. I see you jumping at the bit.
Yeah, EJ wants to capitalize on that, and I just want to say, I want to inject this before you transition. How many pairs of shoes? How many college educations? How many backpacks? How many sets of school supplies? How much clothing? Like, in what way can that $1 million a year benefit society? But instead, it does not. And EJ, please take it away.
So what you were saying is bang on what I was going to say. I was also thinking about specifically pastors like Kenneth Copeland, who have a private jet, and other mega pastors like that, because they oftentimes don't have churches, they have stadiums. And if you are like me and you're a bit of a nerd and you get curious about figures, you should probably look up how much property tax a stadium is worth, because they are worth more than you would think. They are incredibly big buildings that hold people in the thousands comfortably. And I feel if instead of going down the route of diminishing the Johnson Act, they were instead to enforce it fully, I feel a lot of mega pastors would be selling their stadiums, hopping on their private jet and going to the nearest country that doesn't have any contact with the US, because they would be owing the US government a lot of money that I don't think a lot of them have.
Yeah, we've covered a lot in this segment. There's so many things that I wanted to kind of harp back on. I think the property taxes and the economic impact of churches is something that everybody really needs to consider. I mean, think about it. If you are watching this show right now, it's very likely that you pay more in property taxes than the Catholic Church does. A multi-billion dollar, $100 billion organization. I don't know how much they're endowed with or what they've got. I'm sure it's in the billions, probably hundreds of billions. But in any case, this is an organization, like we've talked about in previous segments, that has the money to do what they want. These clergy members on TV, they have the money to do what they want. They pay no taxes. And I just don't understand how that sits well with America. And then harping back on, where does this come from? EJ talked about, earlier in our country's history, we just kind of got comfortable with these policies. I think that it's a much older doctrine in which the church was just in charge of everything. And we kind of just let it happen. And it's 5,000 years in the making. I mean, older than that, where religious people or people in power said, well, I get my power from God, and nobody could question it because they either, didn't have the education to, didn't have the means to, or the power to, and they just kind of accepted it. I think our memory as human beings, generationally, is not one that's very long. And we tend to just kind of adopt the perspectives of our ancestors, of our forefathers, if you will. And if they kind of held the church on a pedestal, many times they raised their children to do it, and it's fine. And here we are in a situation where now the church is openly gloating, and I shouldn't say Republicans, even though Senator Lankford is a Republican, but lawmakers are gloating as well that this isn't useful, or that a measure like this isn't even really necessary. We've recently just heard from Tracy and EJ. Rob, I want to give you a chance to respond before we close out. So what's on your mind?
I was convinced immediately by EJ, and I have changed my mind again. They should enforce the rule because mob rules. You're talking about this. It's hard to fathom the immense amount of money that they have. So, like, wouldn't it be great if there's a bunch of little underdogs that can say everything that they want to say? That just wouldn't be the case. So if the rule were actually enforced properly, then it would level the playing field, because then just people couldn't say things that they're not supposed to say. But if repealed and then people could say anything they want, the people with more money will say more with their private jets and abilities to go places. So money wins. I should have more of it.
Yeah. On that note,
we should have more of it.
Tracy, you're dropping some fire in the private chat that we have here. Can you just go over some of these stats that you're finding? This is crazy.
Yeah, I looked up the value of Kenneth Copeland Ministries, which includes Eagle Mountain International Church. They're estimated to have a property value of almost $60 million just in Tarrant County. And so I looked up the zip code of where they were, and I plugged that into an online calculator, and that only limited me up to $10 million. So I just multiplied it by 6. And that came out with, hang on, let me pull up my calculator again. The Kenneth Copeland Ministries just out of Tarrant County would have to pay $738,600 yearly, approximately. That's not accounting for, whatever write-offs or what have you, but that would just be their base property tax.
That's crazy. And, this is why our logo on the nonprofits is a preacher in kind of that circle and slash sign, keep out. And I want to remind people, actually, on that note, that the nonprofits has merch. We've got all kinds of great gear, shirts, T-shirts, sweatshirts, the bigotry duck. If it looks like bigotry and quacks like bigotry, it's probably bigotry, and that's the bigotry duck for you. But yeah, go ahead, folks. If you want to support us, go ahead, grab a T-shirt like I've got, grab a tank top because the summer's coming up. And if you like coffee, grab yourself a mug. But anyway, I want to thank you again for tuning in. Don't forget to tune in tomorrow night with our last segment of the week, and go ahead and get yourself some merch. Thanks.